All right, let's dive right into this ultimate cheat sheet for the NEET exam. If you are structuring your high-yield notes for biology right now, you are in exactly the right place. In this explainer, we're basically going to act as focus students, breaking down the living world into the absolute essentials you actually need to know. Here's the game plan to crack this chapter. We're looking at defining versus characteristic features, exactly why growth fails the test, the big exceptions in reproduction, the true marks of life, and finally, the strict rules for naming organisms. Okay, Section 1, Defining versus Characteristic Features. Let's get into it. So, there's this hard line in biology we really need to master for the exam. Notice the distinction here. A characteristic feature is found in living things. Like how humans can speak, but a plant obviously can't. It's a feature, sure, but it's not universal. But a defining feature, that has a concrete, ironclad rule of 0 exceptions. It literally must be present in 100% of living organisms and exactly 0% of non-living things. If it failed either of those metrics, it gets totally disqualified. Moving on to Section 2, Why Growth Fails the Test. If you've got your notebook out, definitely write this down. Scientifically, growth is measured by what we call twin traits. That simply means either an increase in mass, like, getting heavier as you grow up, or an increase in number, like a single-celled bacteria splitting into 2. Both of those count as growth. But here is exactly why growth completely fails that ultimate defining test we just talked about. Think of a simple accretion analogy. Imagine you park your car under a tree, and a flock of birds leaves some, deposits on your hood. Or think of a mountain gathering snow during a massive winter storm. Technically speaking, the mass of that car or that mountain just increased. This external accumulation mimics growth. And because non-living things can technically grow in mass this way, it completely disqualifies general growth as a defining feature of life. Crazy, right? So the crucial distinction you need to make in your notes is this. While general growth totally fails our strict test, internal growth, meaning growth that originates from the inside via cell division, is absolutely exclusive to living organisms. So if your exam asks if internal growth is a defining feature, the answer is a resounding yes. Just don't let them trick you into confusing it with general external growth. All right, Section 3, the reproduction exceptions. This right here is the trap so many students fall into. We just naturally assume all living things reproduce, right? But look at these exceptions. Mules, which are the offspring of a donkey and a horse, are entirely sterile. Worker bees, they don't reproduce at all. Only the queen handles that. And of course, there are infertile human couples. For your exams, you've got to remember that the exceptions are the test questions. Since 100% of living things do not reproduce, reproduction is strictly a characteristic, not a defining feature. It completely fails that 0 exception rule. On to Section 4, the true marks of life. Okay, so we've busted some myths, but there are 3 true defining features of life that perfectly fit our strict criteria. First up, cellular organization. Even the absolute simplest single-cell bacteria requires at least 1 cell for independent survival. Second, metabolism. Basically, the sum total of all chemical reactions happening in a body. Exactly 0% of non-living things metabolize. And finally, consciousness. From a microscopic bacteria putting up its defenses against antibiotics to a houseplant bending toward the sunlight, every single living organism senses and responds to environmental stimuli. These 3, these are your absolute, concrete marks of life. Put a huge star next to these in your notes. Now, I want you to pay really close attention to a classic trick question regarding metabolism. What happens if you isolate a metabolic reaction and perform it completely outside the body, like in a test tube? This is an in vitro reaction. Now, it is scientifically classified as a quote-unquote living reaction because it's the exact same chemical process that happens in your cells. But, and this is a huge but, it does not make the test tube itself alive, right? It is simply a living reaction occurring inside a non-living container. 1.7 to 1.8 million. Think about that for a second. That number represents the staggering amount of identified species currently known on Earth. And honestly, that's just what we've discovered so far. This sheer volume of biodiversity brings us to a really massive logistical challenge. How on earth do scientists organize and talk about all of these things without getting hopelessly confused? Which brings us to Section 5, the rules of naming organisms. Think about a simple plant for a second. In one state, it might be called mudar, in another, it's ak, and in another country, it's called something completely different. If you ask for a mudar in the wrong place, literally nobody will know what you mean. We desperately need a universal system. That's where our nomenclature agencies come in. The ICDN establishes the strict rules for botanical or plant names. Meanwhile, the ICZN sets the code for zoological or animal names. These two agencies basically act as the global rulemakers, making sure that a scientist in India and a scientist in Brazil are using the exact same standard name for the exact same organism. So let's look at the strict rules themselves, which were created by the brilliant Carolus Linnaeus. He devised binomial nomenclature, a structured two-part naming system. Jot these 4 steps down for your exams. They are super important. First, the genus name always comes first and must be capitalized. Second, the species name comes next and is always entirely lowercase. Third, the names must be of Latin origin. And you might wonder, why Latin? Well, because it's a dead language. It doesn't evolve or change over time with slang, meaning the scientific definition stays locked in forever. And fourth, if you handwrite the name in your notebook, you absolutely must underline the 2 parts separately. If you type it, it's got to be in italics. Let's see these rules in action. Take the common mango, for example, Mangifera indica. Notice that uppercase M for the genus, Mangifera. Then notice the lowercase I for the species, Indica. And look at how the entire name is typed out in italics. It's just a precise, universally understood biological formula. As we wrap up our cheat sheet explainer today, I'm going to leave you with a high-yield exam trap to really test your memory. Is self-consciousness a defining feature of living things? Think carefully about this. While consciousness, the general ability to sense and respond to the environment, is a true defining feature of all life, self-consciousness is unique only to humans. Because the rest of the animal kingdom lacks it, it completely fails the 100% test.